Imagine a scenario where Anakin Skywalker didn't burn on Mustafar after his battle with Obi-Wan Kenobi. He still had his arms and legs cut off, but after he was rescued by Palpatine, he was fitted with new limbs, making him more powerful, capable, and angry than ever before. But how would the fate of the galaxy change if Anakin survived relatively unscathed, at least compared to how he ended up in the timeline we know? On Coruscant, not long after he had fully recovered and gotten used to his new prosthetic limbs, ones far less limiting than a full Durasteel suit, Anakin was summoned to Sidious's quarters. As he walked into the room, his dark robes flowing behind him, Sidious looked up and smiled. He was pleased to see his apprentice doing so well, but that seemingly warm reception lasted only a few moments. Anakin, or should we say Vader, stopped short of Sidious, bowing deeply to his master, expressing his thanks for saving him from the banks of the Mustafar lava rivers. But before he could even straighten up, Vader was hit with a blast of Force lightning that sent him flying across the room. Sidious rose from his seat, that smile now gone. He looked down at his new apprentice. Sidious scolded Vader, telling him that he was most disappointed by his efforts to kill his former master, and that he should not have lost in the duel. Vader struggled to his feet again, stunned slightly, but it's what Sidious said next that shook the young man to his core. Sidious, almost casually, told Vader that Padme would have surely been disappointed in him too had she not died. Vader looked Sidious in the eyes, and the Elder Sith Lord's smile returned, only this time it was cruel and malicious. But what he had just told Vader was not a lie. Vader stumbled slightly, tears in his eyes. He had chosen this path for her, to save her. But before he could ask any questions or even make sense of things, he was once again blasted across the room by another flurry of Force lightning from a cackling Sidious. Sidious told Vader that if he wanted to redeem himself, then he needed to go and tackle the most powerful of them all, Yoda. Sidious had been humiliated by their stalemate, but he knew that if anyone could kill the little green Jedi, it was his new apprentice. After all, this version of Vader wasn't held back by a cumbersome suit. He could reach his full potential in the dark side. Vader begrudgingly agreed, though he didn't know where he could find the little green Jedi. He had seemingly disappeared completely. Meditating and reaching out into the Force, his connection to it far stronger, Vader searched for Yoda's familiar presence, eventually feeling it on Dagobah. He thought that system was empty, but nonetheless, he would depart immediately. Vader summoned his new Star Destroyer, and before long, it dropped out of hyperspace above the lonesome planet of Dagobah. Vader went down to the surface alone, and found that while the planet was strong with the Force, he was drawn to one particular location in the northern hemisphere of the planet. He soon came across an opening to a cave, sensing that a powerful darkness surrounded the area. But just before he entered, he heard a voice weakly call out to him. Vader spun, his blade igniting, to see Yoda, sitting not 10 meters away from him on a log. This was not the Yoda he remembered. The being in front of him looked tired and broken, as if he had had the weight of the galaxy on his shoulders. The Yoda of old was stern yet jolly, but this Yoda's eyes were filled with sadness. Vader sensed the small Jedi Master knew his time had come, and as he walked towards him, Yoda made no move to flee or even argue. The red of Vader's lightsaber lit up Yoda's face, mixing with the green to give him a sickly look, as the old Jedi looked at him one last time before uttering a short yet profound phrase. "One with the Force am I, and the Force is with me." He shut his eyes and Vader sneered, slashing his blade, freeing the old Jedi's head from his body. It was clear Yoda had given up, beaten down by the fall of the Jedi Order and the rise of the Sith. Vader felt a great shift in the Force as this beacon of light was snuffed out once and for all. Vader picked up Yoda's remains and took them back to Coruscant. providing Sidious with proof that Yoda had been dealt with. He was surprised that Yoda had not put up a fight, but pleased to see his apprentice had still managed to carry out his orders. Yet Vader was still filled with rage. He thought perhaps killing Yoda might suppress it, but it was stronger than ever. Back in his private quarters, he meditated and came to the realization that while he was undoubtedly angry at the Jedi, a large part of that anger was directed at his new master, Darth Sidious. He was the cause of all of Vader's problems. He had suspected it from the moment Sidious recruited him as his apprentice. Yet Anakin was blinded by his hate towards the Jedi and his love for Padme to really notice how much he hated Sidious. But with Yoda dead, Kenobi having disappeared, and his beloved Padme all gone, it was clearer than ever that there was one more person who had to die: Sidious himself. After all, Sidious had been lying to him all along. Perhaps Darth Plagueis was able to save others from death, but he had not passed that skill on to Sidious, and in turn, Sidious had not passed it on to Vader. Vader knew what he had to do. We flash over to the twin suns of Tatooine, where Obi-Wan Kenobi felt the shift in the Force following Yoda's death. Soon, he was visited by the ghost of the Grand Master, as well as Qui-Gon Jinn. Obi-Wan was stunned to see the two elder Jedi, realizing how much more dire protecting Luke and Leia was. Vader knew he was alive, and he couldn't just sit there and hope that staying in the most obvious of hiding places would work. Obi-Wan would contact Senator Bail Organa, having him take Luke away from Tatooine. They knew someone who could take the children and watch over them, someone who Vader thought for sure was dead. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan would attempt to do what Yoda could not, hiding away on a remote planet until the children came of age and sought him out for guidance. Over the next few years, Sidious and his apprentice continued to grow their empire. The clone troopers who had bravely and valiantly fought the Clone Wars were largely phased out in favor of recruited troopers that formed the Imperial Army, although Vader insisted that he kept his own personal company of clone troopers, the 501st, something which Sidious granted him. When Vader seized the chance to finally get revenge, Sidious never saw it coming. He of course knew at some point all Sith apprentices betray their masters, but his arrogance had blinded him to the fact that Anakin had reached that point. The two Sith Lords were in Sidious's office, wrapping up a meeting of the heads of the Empire. The meeting went well, and Sidious and Anakin escorted them from the office. As the two Sith returned to Sidious's desk, the Sith Master started to explain his next mission to Vader. He wanted him to go tackle a small uprising on Mandalore. But as Sidious spoke and the two walked side by side, a lightsaber ignited from Vader's side, spearing up into Sidious's body and out the other side. Vader whipped it backward and through Sidious's back, leaving a gaping wound. The Sith Master shrieked and instinctively blasted lightning, sending Vader crashing into the office wall. But the attack didn't last long, as Sidious slumped to the ground, dead. It was an unexpected, unceremonious, and violent end for the Sith Lord, but one that he no less deserved. Had Vader been in his bulky mechanical suit, as we see in the canon timeline, there is no way that he would have been fast enough to get the jump on Sidious. It goes to show that by rescuing Vader and making him stronger than ever, Sidious had ironically been the architect to his own downfall. After the death of Sidious, Vader decided to put Grand Vizier Mas Amedda in charge of the Senate. He didn't care about any of that stuff, and he knew that not only would Mas Amedda do a good job, but he would also stay in line. Many of the projects that Sidious was overseeing fell by the wayside, most notably the Death Star. It was 3/4 complete, yet Vader never pushed for the structure to be finished off. If the Imperial officers wanted to play army and continue with it, then so be it. But he was not interested in a space station. The station itself was ultimately completed, though the main weapon never became operational, and the Death Star essentially became nothing more than a massive floating Imperial HQ. Similarly, the initial designs for Starkiller Base and the Sith Eternal Fleet were scrapped, with Vader preferring to focus on Thrawn's TIE Defender program. Even as a boy, Vader had always loved flying and piloting, and a starship was far more exciting and useful to him than a planet-destroying weapon. But just as Vader started to settle into his role, he sensed something. Something was pulling him to the ancient Sith world of Malachor. There were rumors of rebellion there, but there was also a dark presence, and a familiar, light one. Arriving on the dark ancient Sith homeworld, Vader was genuinely shocked by what he saw. It was not the fact that there was a small rebel cell there, not the fact that they were locked in battle with Darth Maul and several of his own Inquisitors, but it was the fact that his own former apprentice was with them, Ahsoka Tano. He had not thought about her in years, positive that she had died during Order 66, so when she confronted him, Vader was startled. Ahsoka knew how her master had fallen, and she had seen and heard about the dark things he had done. So she separated her attachment to Anakin the Jedi and focused on Vader the Sith. She hoped to redeem Anakin and talk some sense into him, but if that wasn't possible, well, she knew she had what it took to kill him. But as they dueled, Ahsoka's white lightsabers clashing with Vader's red saber, it was clear that Tano's skills had stagnated, while Vader's had continued to grow and develop. Vader might have started off on the back foot, but as the two dueled into a large ancient Sith shrine, Vader summoned the powers of the dark side and stepped up his fight, switching from defense to attack. Ahsoka had been so sure of herself, yet in front of Vader, she suddenly realized that maybe this had been the wrong move. But it was too late. Using the Force, Vader slammed her against the temple wall and then slowly pulled her towards him until he held her by the throat. Ahsoka gasped for breath, but Vader's mechanical hand squeezed tighter and tighter. She could have given up, but there was something pushing her to survive. Luke and Leia. They still needed her. They were both 10 now, and under Ahsoka's training, they had both become strong and capable Jedi apprentices. They were on Rada, safe with a friend, expecting Ahsoka to return, and that's what she intended to do. Using every ounce of strength she could, Ahsoka cut Vader's mechanical hand off and pushed him backward, before fleeing into the world between worlds, which had opened behind her, almost as if she wasn't meant to die there that day. Over the next 10 years, Darth Vader kept largely to himself. Any attempts to find Ahsoka had failed, and he still didn't understand how she had disappeared before him. He would occasionally involve himself in the running of the Empire, especially the TIE Defender program, yet he would often spend his time meditating, studying, and training. Yet through it all, he remained strong, powerful, and full of hate. Hate that he could pass on and others could learn from. Even as a Jedi, he had enjoyed being a master to Ahsoka, yet his time training the Inquisitors had not provided Vader with the same satisfaction. It really was a hard and lonely life being a Sith. He had the galaxy in the palm of his hand, but no one to share it with. But it was during a seemingly routine attack on the planet of Takodana that things changed for Vader. Thrawn was leading a campaign to take over the sector, and he called for Vader's assistance. As there was strong resistance on the ground, Vader was always happy to get involved in a fight, and he soon arrived on the planet, cutting through the locals and the pirates. But as he approached a small settlement, Vader stopped in his tracks, sensing something familiar. He turned his head and saw a young woman. He did not recognize her, though she bore a striking resemblance to Padme. Behind her stood a young man, the same age as her and with the same stony look. The two of them unhooked lightsabers from their belts and ignited them. The girl's blade blue and the boy's green. Jedi. The Sith Lord could have attacked, he should have attacked, but he was intrigued. His senses told him that he knew them, yet he knew that he didn't. He walked closer, studying their faces as they raised their blades in preparation. Vader looked from the boy to the girl, and listened intently as she spoke 5 simple words. "You know who we are." Vader frowned before he started to make the connection. He knew Padme had been pregnant, but he never sensed twins. Vader's eyes widened, and he asked if they were the children of Padme Amidala. The young man nodded, a look of steely determination in his eyes. Vader's head flooded with memories of all that had happened, his time with Padme, the love they had shared, The good times, how she had betrayed him and brought Obi-Wan to him on Mustafar, how she had caused all of this, how she was the reason that he had cybernetic limbs and was forced to kill so many Jedi. Vader didn't know how to feel and only wanted to make that pain go away. He roared and raised his own lightsaber, running at the two of them. Vader swung at the girl and missed, hitting only fresh air and seeing the boy swing his own blade. The Sith Lord felt a hot, stinging sensation run down his body. Vader looked down, confused, to see a large cauterized wound running down from his left shoulder to his lower abdomen. The intense pain suddenly shot through his body, and he dropped to his knees, feeling faint. Turning his head, he saw the young man looking back at him. Vader was fast, but they had been faster. The two of them had been filled with calm and understanding, while Vader had been filled with confusion, conflict, and rage, blinding his instincts. The young woman sighed heavily and held back tears as she walked over to Vader and kneeled. The young man knelt and held Vader's mechanical hand. Vader gasped as they introduced themselves as Luke and Leia, saying they had been trained by Ahsoka Tano. Luke said they didn't want to kill him, and they had hoped to be able to appeal to his human side. Yet it was clear that Vader was too far gone and too deep in the dark side. There was a lot of information for Vader to process, and as his life ebbed away, he looked up at his son and daughter and smiled slightly. He had not genuinely smiled in decades, but something about this death made Vader feel whole. His smile faded as he closed his eyes and whispered that he would see Padme soon. And with that, Vader was no more. Luke and Leia Amidala would go on to complete their training under Ahsoka Tano, who taught them to be something more than the Jedi of the past. With Vader dead, it was finally safe for Obi-Wan to emerge, serving as the older and wiser mentor like Yoda had been to Luke in the timeline we know. All, finally, seemed well in the galaxy. But back aboard the floating Imperial headquarters, the doors to Vader's personal chamber hiss open, and a man strode in, looking around. In his hand was a repeating hologram from Thrawn, informing him of Vader's death at the hands of a mystery female Jedi. The man shut it off and sat down in Vader's meditation chamber, feeling the darkness all around him. And he sighed and closed his eyes. When he reopened them, the man knew that he was charged with carrying on the legacy of the Sith. Galen Merrick, now Lord Starkiller, smiled to himself. So now it's over to you. What do you think would happen if Anakin didn't burn? Did you like our take on the story? Be sure to let us know your thoughts and opinions in the comments section down below. And as always, thanks for watching.